Welcome to ESG Decoded, where we unravel the business complexities at the intersection of environmental, social, and governance issues.
I'm Erika Schiller, and I'm joined by my ClimeCo colleagues, Emma Cox and Anna Stablum.
Get ready to explore the intersection of sustainability, innovation, and ethical leadership, the dynamic forces shaping our global economy.
From climate action to social responsibility, we're here to decode the ESG landscape by interviewing interesting leading figures across the globe that will empower you with actionable insights.
Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just embarking on your sustainability journey, this podcast is your compass for navigating the future of responsible business practices.
Let's decode ESG together.
Special thanks to Amazon Sustainability for their support and sponsorship of this episode. Amazon's operations include data and fulfillment centers, corporate buildings, and a global transportation network, a footprint that comes with responsibility. That's why Amazon is working toward a carbon-free energy future by optimizing efficiency, investing where it matters, and supporting communities where we operate. From more efficient data centers to an increasingly electrified delivery network, we're rethinking how energy is used from the server to the doorstep. Learn more at amazon.com/sustainability. Hello and welcome to ESG Decoded. I'm your host, Erika Schiller. Today, we're talking about the challenges of Scope 3 decarbonization in the tourism industry. How to make tourism more sustainable. And we are joined by Road Scholar, which is driving sustainable practices while following its mission to inspire adults to learn, discover, and travel. For those who aren't familiar, Road Scholar is the not-for-profit world leader in educational travel for older adults. It was founded as Elder Hostel in 1975. Road Scholar has served more than 6.5 million lifelong learners over the past 50 years, a lot of students. With educational adventures hosted by expert faculty in nearly 100 countries and throughout the United States, Road Scholar is truly a university of the world. I'm excited to be joined by two representatives of Road Scholar, Meghan Flynn and Bryn Geddes. In 2004, Road Scholar appointed its first ever sustainability manager, Bryn Geddes, to lead efforts to reduce waste and carbon emissions across their worldwide programs. We are also joined by Meghan Flynn, who is the Associate Vice President of Program Strategy at Road Scholar. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we'll be discussing how to drive sustainable tourism. What are the challenges of addressing Scope 3 with both carbon emissions, single-use plastics, and food waste in the space? Some big challenges. And Meghan, I'll direct this first question to you. Most companies start their decarbonization journey by understanding their carbon footprint. Ideally, scope out what are the biggest impacts and levers for emission reductions. What did you learn from your first carbon footprint in 2023?
Well, when we first started looking at our carbon footprint in 2023, one of the earliest things we learned was that Road Scholar does not fit neatly into a standard tour operator model. What I mean by that is we operate more than 700 unique educational itineraries. And if you're not in the tourism scope, that's a lot of itineraries. That's very uncommon. So there is not a single uniform footprint that we could really use to measure. So in order to make this work more manageable, we took a representative sample of programs, and then we partnered with an organization that uses a trip-level carbon calculator. And that really gave us a useful big picture view and helped us develop a formula that allowed us to reasonably estimate the emissions across our full portfolio. And so what that analysis really confirmed, and this is something that pretty much everyone in the travel space already knows, and it's pretty intuitive for anybody, is that air travel is by far the largest driver of emissions. Unfortunately, it means it's also the lever that individual organizations like ours have the least control over. So that was an important learning, but we also learned the limits of the tool itself. So most carbon calculators are intentionally very high level. And so they rely on a few core inputs, which is fine for awareness and benchmarking, but they don't give you much guidance on how to reduce emissions in a meaningful program specific way, especially when the biggest contributor is something that you can't usually change. So that full process and the first footprint did not give us a perfect roadmap. But what it did, which was equally as important, is it gave us clarity. It helped us understand where our real constraints are, where we do have influence, and why sustainability at Road Scholar needs to be about thoughtful, honest progress and not headlines.
Okay. So it gave you that kind of first understanding, but now we're going to talk about how your progress and your approach has evolved since 2023. So, Bryn, this question's for you. In order to get more granular and actionable data, next you audited more than 100 of your, 700 to 800 itineraries to gather on-the-ground data. I understand this was perhaps too structured. Can you tell us how the audit worked?
Yeah. So to kind of help us understand what we were going for, we had set as an initiative to kick off at the beginning of 2025. Our goal was to reduce plastic and food waste on our playgrounds, because those are really visible things for our participants. And so we took that information and it really guided the structure of our audit. So we audited our accommodation, transportation, activity vendors, and meal providers. And throughout the audit, we focused on their plastic use, food waste. We learned about if they were locally owned, and then a little bit more about any commitments they might have to sustain. And so the data that we collected was valuable. It helped us to learn more about our vendors, and it gave our teams an opportunity to get comfortable asking more questions about sustainability, which was something that most of them had done previously. But the process itself was not seamless. So we had 22 different teams collecting this information, and the way that those questions were interpreted really varied. The survey format that we used to collect the data, while it was super efficient for me looking at it after the fact, it wasn't very user-friendly, and it didn't allow us the opportunity to gather any nuanced data. So we determined that moving forward, we need to change our approach to gathering this information by working more collaboratively with our teams.
Okay. And what were some of the biggest takeaways from this audit?
Our biggest takeaway was that we can't treat every region where we operate in the same. So Central America, Botswana, New Zealand, the Southwest United States, these are all very different places with access to different things. Like some of them have access to sustainable transportation infrastructure, and some don't have access to safe drinking water. So what we needed to do was set unique goals for each region. And then the audit also opened our eyes to some interesting opportunities for collaboration. So in the future, our plan is to work with local destination management organizations and tourism boards to boost sustainable tourism at a local level. And then when we're thinking about some of the work we do with a larger chain for hotels, for example, we need to take that as an opportunity to encourage more sustainable action, not just at the corporate level, but in a way that reaches each of their properties.
And so that was a portion of your itineraries that you did with this initial audit. How are you approaching data collection and opportunity identification for the remaining locations that you didn't initially audit?
Well, as Bryn mentioned earlier, the initial auditing process taught us a lot. One of the biggest learnings was about how we ask for information. We realized pretty quickly that a traditional audit model felt really overwhelming for our partners. It was also a bit too rigid. Many of the questions were framed as simple yes or no answers. So, for example, has this vendor eliminated single-use plastics? That doesn't allow us to capture all that was kind of important progress happening in the in-between yes or no. So vendors who haven't fully eliminated plastic yet, but are actively trying, that really matters. And we want to recognize them. Yeah, so the structure we had wasn't serving that. And that kind of nuance doesn't show up in a spreadsheet, but it does come out in a conversation. So we've decided to shift towards a more interview-based approach. So we're still going to be asking our partners to gather information from local vendors, but instead of stopping at a checkbox, we're creating space for dialogue. And those conversations really help us understand the story behind the data, things like what's working, where the barriers are, where Road Scholar can support progress rather than just assess it. And this really fundamentally, it changes the tone of the process. So instead of sustainability feeling like a compliance exercise, it becomes a shared problem solving effort. So it's more collaborative, respectful for the local realities. And frankly, we're really feeling like it's going to be more productive.
So what are you most excited about as you're evolving and advancing your ESG journey? Can you share about the detailed footprinting exercise that's coming next?
So we're planning to do detailed carbon footprint calculations for all of our itineraries this year.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll be a lot. So, we have support, so I'm excited. But initially we hesitated, as Meghan had mentioned, because it can be imprecise. So how that might look in practice is that all 3-star hotels essentially get the same score when you're looking at our carbon footprint. And for us, we know that that's not enough because some of our hotels are doing a lot of things that we need to be celebrating and that should be reflected in that footprinting exercise. So we did find a group to work with to help us do these calculations. And over the course of 3 years, we'll get more and more precise data so that those carbon calculations become more and more precise. So this is exciting for us because we'll be able to do the due diligence of gathering and reporting this data and then take more specific action to reduce our footprint as we hone that information over time.
And Meghan, what role do you think Road Scholar can have in driving sustainability in the broader tourism industry outside of just your itineraries?
Well, as you probably gathered in just the last few minutes of our conversation, we have learned a lot in the last few years. We've learned what works, what doesn't, and where the real challenges are. So if we can help others in the industry learn faster or avoid some of our early missteps, or not missteps, but hurdles, I'd say, that's really meaningful. And at the same time, we're realistic. No single organization is going to solve the climate crisis. It's going to take collective action across the entire tourism industry. And so we feel that we can contribute by other people taking the first step. Sustainability can feel really overwhelming. The supply chain is really gnarly. And so we just, we want to make sure people know it doesn't have to start with perfection. It starts with engagement and progress. So if we can make that process feel more accessible and achievable, then we're helping move the industry forward. And that's really in line with our mission to educate and inspire.
I'd also think, if you're going out and talking to hotel chains and restaurants and folks on the ground saying, this is important to us, we want to have more sustainable activities, hearing that from multiple parties is also going to drive those businesses to make changes. So you have been building out sustainable activity policies for Road Scholar and for your partners, documenting best practices. How do you think these policies will be used in an ideal world?
Our sustainable activity policy and sensitive activity standards are meant to help us establish sustainability as a core value across all of our programs and also throughout our supply chain. So ideally, by implementing these, we're giving our partners a clear roadmap for what we're looking for with activities and other vendors' programs. So not all of our programs need to have a sustainability theme for the programs themselves to be sustainable and follow sustainable standards and best practices. And the other benefit of this is we can show our participants that by traveling with us, they can travel responsibly.
Yeah. Are you getting responses from your participants? Do they like that? Are they engaged with that?
We've just recently implemented these, but as we've started to grow our initiative around sustainability as a whole, we've had a good response from our participants. They're really enthusiastic about reducing plastic and food waste. I can mention that at the beginning. That was a top priority because that's a really visual thing for them. And then we do receive a lot of outreach from our participants about asking questions about things like animal welfare and the standards we have and how are we following up with vendors. So by implementing these standards, we now have a process for that. And we've developed a timeline for compliance and we'll be able to just in general have done our due diligence across all of our programs, all of the activities we have, so that participants aren't going to have to stress about if something doesn't align with their values, for example.
And when we talked about these policies earlier, you had mentioned cultural sustainability, and I was very curious, what do you mean by that?
So for most of us, when we think about sustainability, we're thinking about the environment or maybe biodiversity. But the human element of sustainability is real and it's important. So within a travel context, we want to make sure that we're having a positive impact on the communities that we visit. So this seems like considering things like the impact of over-tourism in a destination or how we structure a visit to an indigenous community. So for a heritage site that might be more heavily touristed and a lot of people go there, we want to make sure that whenever possible, we're collaborating with the site operators to make sure that our visits aren't disrupted. So for some experiences, we're looking at possibly adjusting the times that we visit based off routes. And this will make the experience better for our participants, and it will make us better partners for the operators on site. And then when we look at, visiting an indigenous community, we pride ourselves on creating these rich educational experiences. And we are honoring the traditions of the communities that we visit. And what that looks like in action is that we want to learn from people, not just about them. So it's really important to us to ensure that Indigenous components are led by, or at least developed with that Indigenous community to ensure authentic and respectful representation. And this is generally how we've approached our idea of cultural sustainability. We want to be good partners to the communities that we visit, and we want them to be excited to have us back.
Yeah, that's really thoughtful. And I'm glad to hear that you're making those decisions and that it's also improving the experience of, both the parties being visited and the parties who are the visitors. In addition to reducing your Scope 3 emissions, you're also supporting sustainable projects through environmental credits. How does that fit into Rhodes Scholars' mission and goals?
Well, our philosophy is to first reduce what we can, primarily through the things we've talked about, clear guidance and education with our partners. And then we address what remains through high quality environmental credits. For us, this is not about making bold claims like reaching net zero. That's not at all what we're trying to do here. What it is just about taking responsibility. We're acknowledging the impact our programs have and what we're doing and what we can do to manage it thoughtfully. So ultimately, really, our mission depends on delivering educational experiences around the world. So not only is it the right thing to do, but supporting environmental projects is also essential to ensuring that we can continue to serve that mission for the next 50 years and the 50 years beyond that.
Yeah, that's really cool. How did you select the projects that you support?
We choose projects that help us create a balanced portfolio and represent locations where we have programs. So we want to make sure that if we're going somewhere, we're making a good impact there. So for example, in Southeast Asia, it's challenging to reduce our use of plastic water bottles. So we support the Ton to Ton project in Vietnam and Cambodia that captures ocean-bound plastic and turns it into fuel. We're also supporting water restoration projects in the Western United States. So we have a lot of programs that are in the Western U.S. And that whole area experiences frequent droughts. This year has been a rough one. So that's something we want to be aware of. And then in general, we're looking to find and support projects that benefit the environment and local communities. Because when you get a local community involved in conservation, it can increase the success of a project while strengthening their connection to their cultural identity.
Absolutely agree. And I think it also probably builds stronger ties with Rhodes Scholar and the visitors that are coming because they're seeing also benefits through the programs that you're supporting. Now we're going to move into a lightning round. So just some quick questions. Bryn, what's one simple way you're reducing plastic waste in your programs?
So in places where we have access to safe drinking water, we are asking our transportation providers not to supply our routes with plastic bottles. So this is meant to be a sign of hospitality, but ultimately it contributes to a huge amount of plastic waste. So in 2025, for example, we had nearly 100,000 people take a Rhodes Scholar program. And if those programs reduced the number of bottles per participant by 3, that would reduce the plastic use by 300,000 bottles. So that's massive. We're trying to keep things like that in mind when we're approaching both of these.
Yeah, that's great. I love to see it. Bryn, another question for you. How are your participants responding to your sustainability initiatives?
So we've surveyed our participants, and we're really encouraged to see that as of the end of last year, 68% of people were aware of our sustainability initiative. So that feels good. We've had good feedback from people about the ways that we're going about reducing plastic use in particular. And the great thing about our participants is that they hold us accountable. So they want to see us do more and be better. And we're anticipating that we'll see more engagement with this initiative, especially as we roll out more of our standards and those become more visible in our programs. And I think it will make our participants even more proud to be Rhodes Scholars.
Love it. Meghan, this one's for you. What gives you the most optimism about the future of tourism?
Even just 20 years ago, sustainability and tourism mostly lived in kind of the ecotourism space. So it was really kind of niche and really great. I love ecotourism. But today it's becoming a core to the entire industry. And that shift gives me real optimism. Because, one of my industry peers likes to say, it's not a small number of people doing sustainably perfectly. It's all of us doing some basic things imperfectly, just like Bryn said with the 3 water bottles per person. And so if you haven't taken any steps that will directly decrease your footprint, start there.
Good. I like the challenge. So for both of you, what is the best Rhodes Scholar trip you've been on, or which one are you most excited about joining next?
I was on a trip called the Hidden Coasts of Scotland. It's a cruise-based program on a beautiful new small ship. And it really takes you out into the wilds of Scotland. You get to see puffins. Who doesn't love that? It was very cool. But, something that I think is really cool because the cruise industry can often get a really bad rap in the sustainability sphere. And there are a lot of really mindful expedition companies out there that are doing some really great things. And so we were on a brand new ship that, is built to be as efficiently as possible as far as the energy that it's outputting and the fuel and all that. But beyond that, I had a chance to sit down with the director of their catering and their food and beverage and ask them, what are you doing with all this food? You see buffets, you always think of buffets as like the most wasteful thing. And to say that they have gotten this down to a science to like the amount of food per person over the course of, the itinerary is an understatement. They have figured out exactly how much everybody needs and what they need and where they're off by that tiny percentage. They figured out how to take that food and put it into the next day's food because they have to pay for waste. And so they've become really creative. And so, yes, there's certainly a lot of improvement that can happen in the cruise industry, but there are a lot of cruise lines doing the right thing. So I think to just kind of write them off as unsustainable is unfair. So it was cool to be able to challenge my perspective on that. And then also see dolphins.
Okay, so I have to ask, since this was an educational trip, what was one thing that you learned?
Something that I learned, so there are these really, really old prehistoric cultures there. And so there are ruins that basically there was this whole civilization a super long time ago that was completely abandoned and nobody knows why. And so it was so cool because we used this cruise ship as we call it a floating campus. And so the day before we got there, we had this incredible educator that was talking, setting the landscape, giving us the history, talking about the mystery. And then the next day, we pull up and we go out and we see it. And so to be there and kind of see what we had just learned about and poke around and see this, something that must have taken these people so long to create. And then all of a sudden to just head out with no reason that we can understand was so interesting.
Oh, cool. Well, I always think of Scotland and murder mysteries, so maybe there's that. It's been since the longest time. Okay, maybe. Bryn, over to you. Bryn, what trip do you want to share with us?
Yeah. So I had a hard time deciding which ones I'd be most excited to go on. But I've narrowed it down to any of our programs in the Galapagos, or we have a program called Exploring the Wilds of Southern Patagonia. And that's a must do.
Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to see photos. Okay, so let's wrap this up. I really appreciate both of your time and sharing the learnings so far. And, also being aware of the challenges and being willing to share, here's how we're addressing them, here's how we're adapting, here's what's next. So if there's one practical takeaway that you want businesses and sustainability leaders to walk away with from this conversation, what would it be?
For me, it's about the stories. Stories inspire people. And I think one of the most exciting parts of this work is discovering the real impact behind them. So, for example, in Costa Rica, through our longstanding partnership with the Sarapiqui Conservation Learning Center, we're not just bringing travelers, we're helping support community education. We're creating sustainable livelihoods and supporting local entrepreneurs. So one woman we work with, she was able to start her own business teaching cooking classes to our participants. And now she can support her family through this work. And that's what sustainability looks like in practice. It's not abstract, it's human. So my biggest takeaway is when you start this journey, don't just focus on the metrics. Look for and share the stories because that's what motivates that real lasting change.
Very cool. What about you, Bryn?
So the products, programs, tours, all of that stuff that we create as businesses or organizations have an impact on the communities and environments. And then saying something radical, but I feel that we all have a duty to be aware and responsible of that impact.
Yeah. Protect everything for the long term so I can still go on a Rhodes Scholar trip.
Exactly. We'll be waiting for you.
Thank you, Bryn and Meghan, so much for joining us on the podcast today and sharing your experiences tackling Scope 3, making tourism more sustainable. It was really wonderful having you both. And I'd want to also thank our listeners for tuning in to ESG Decoded. Please remember to subscribe, follow us on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And as always, we're grateful for a rating or review. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to ESG Decoded. We hope this episode has inspired you to take action in your own ESG journey, stimulating ideas for partnership and innovation.
New episodes drop bi-weekly on Tuesday morning. Subscribe now on your favorite streaming platform to stay in the loop.
Join the conversation on social media using @ESG Decoded or visit climbco.com for more resources.
Until next time, keep decoding, keep innovating, and keep making a positive impact.